Just a magnificent looking animal. It's only 3 metres long. Didn't have a mark on it. Gave us an opportunity to tag her, and he placed his tag perfectly.
2,000 feet down. Pitch black. A sensor is trapped inside something's stomach. 60 seconds earlier, that sensor was strapped to a living 11-foot great white shark. The temperature reading jumps 30 degrees in an instant. The depth reading falls off a cliff. Then, nothing. Just darkness and warmth for 8 straight days. She didn't get away. She didn't fight. She just stopped existing. Marine biologists spent months chasing 3 suspects: an orca, a giant squid, a megalodon. Every single one got ruled out by the data itself. Before we reveal what the data ultimately pointed to, hit like and subscribe, because the truth behind Nova's disappearance is far more unsettling than the theories. What actually killed her had been swimming near her the entire time. Bigger, older, and it's still out there right now. This is how they cracked it. Meet the shark. Call her Nova. 11 feet. Not a pup, not an old giant. A strong young adult already sitting near the top of her food chain, tagged at the edge of a canyon where the seafloor drops into total darkness. Nobody on that boat thought they were looking at prey, but the tag they clipped to her fin wasn't just tracking her. It was building the case file that would later expose her killer. These tags log 3 things continuously: depth, ambient light level, and water temperature, recorded every 60 seconds, day and night, for months at a stretch. They're built to survive crushing pressure and saltwater corrosion, and they're programmed with a release mechanism. After a set number of days, a small corrodable pin gives way. The tag detaches, floats to the surface, and starts pinging its stored data to a satellite. Think of it as a black box, the same kind you'd find on an aircraft. It only gets interesting when something goes catastrophically wrong. For the first 4 months, nothing went wrong. Nova's tag told a beautifully boring story. Patrol patterns along the shelf edge, dives to intercept fish, the occasional cruise up into warmer surface water. Exactly what a healthy great white should be doing. Scientists genuinely love this kind of data. Boring means the animal is alive, behaving normally, and the tag is functioning. Boring is the goal. Researchers were even starting to build a profile of her preferred hunting depths, the times of day she moved inshore, the way she used temperature gradients to conserve energy while cruising. She was, by every measure, a completely unremarkable, healthy shark going about her business. Then, without warning, the pattern broke completely. The break in the pattern. Here's a more engaging, human-friendly version that preserves all of the original information in about 300 words. The satellite signals suddenly stopped coming from the open ocean. Days turned into weeks with no updates, leaving researchers wondering what had happened. Then, at last, a new message arrived. The tracking tag had resurfaced. This is where the mystery took an unexpected turn. When scientists mapped the location where the tag resurfaced, they expected to find it far out at sea, or carried hundreds of miles away by ocean currents, as detached tags usually are. Instead, it appeared almost exactly where the journey had begun, only a couple of miles from Nova's original tagging site. That immediately raised eyebrows. There's a very specific reason why. Once a tracking tag separates from an animal, it normally floats freely on the ocean's surface, where winds and currents push it across vast distances for weeks. Some eventually drift hundreds of miles from the point where they detached. For this tag to end up almost back at its starting location suggested that something had kept it trapped in one place for a long period before it was finally released and allowed to reach the surface. When the tag eventually washed ashore, a member of the research team picked it up from the sand. At first glance, it didn't look like equipment that had simply spent months drifting through salt water. The casing was badly chewed, covered with deep scars and pits, and had an unusual bleached appearance. It looked far more like it had spent time inside a highly acidic environment than floating in the open ocean. At that moment, nobody holding the tag realized they were looking at physical evidence of an attack. But the damaged casing was only the beginning of the story. The real evidence wasn't visible on the outside at all. It was stored inside the tiny memory chip, quietly preserving every second of data, waiting for researchers to download it and uncover what had really happened. The data reveal back at the lab, the team plugged the tag into a laptop and pulled the full temperature depth timeline up on a monitor. For most of the graph, everything looked completely normal. Nova cruising at moderate depth, water temperature sitting in the mid-40s Fahrenheit, cold but typical for that depth on the shelf edge, light levels rising and falling with day and night, clean as a heartbeat. Then the line does something that shouldn't be physically possible in open ocean. In under a minute, the recorded temperature rockets from the mid-40s to the high 70s Fahrenheit, a jump of roughly 30 degrees, instantaneously. There is no naturally occurring process in the open ocean that heats water that fast, that much in that shorter window. You'd need something like a hydrothermal vent directly beneath the tag, and there was nothing like that anywhere near this stretch of coastline. At the exact same moment, the depth reading goes haywire. The tag doesn't drift downward the way a sinking object would. It's yanked, a near vertical plunge covering close to 2,000 feet in a matter of minutes. That's not floating. That's being carried. And then, for the next several days, the readings flatline in a very specific way, pinned at that same warm 70-something degrees, sitting in total darkness, moving slowly with no clear directional pattern, the kind of gentle, ambient motion you'd expect from something being carried inside a body, not dragged behind a struggling animal. The team ran the numbers twice, then a third time, because nobody wanted to be the one who made an embarrassing mistake in a published paper. The conclusion held up every time. This wasn't sensor malfunction. This wasn't the tag getting lost or corroding early. Nova, or at least the tag that had been attached to her, ended up inside the digestive tract of something else, something large enough to take down an 11-foot great white shark and swallow the evidence of the kill along with it. The obvious question follows immediately. What exactly is capable of doing that? Suspect 1. Orcas. The first name on everyone's list was the orca. It's not an unreasonable jump. Killer whales are, as far as we know, the only animals that reliably and deliberately hunt adult great white sharks. We have real, well-documented cases proving it. Off the coast of South Africa, a pair of male orcas became infamous for exactly this behavior, hunting individual great whites with such precision that entire shark populations would flee an area the moment those two orcas showed up, sometimes for months at a stretch. Their method is chillingly specific. Orcas will work together to corner or ram a shark, flipping it upside down. This triggers something called tonic immobility, a natural trance-like paralysis that many sharks fall into when inverted. Once the shark is helpless, the orcas don't eat the whole animal. They perform something closer to surgery, a precise bite near the pectoral fins to extract the liver, which is enormous, oil-rich, and calorically dense. The rest of the carcass is usually left behind to sink or wash ashore. And when this happens, the ripple effect on the local shark population is dramatic. It's called the landscape of fear. Great whites detect the chemical signature of a predation event nearby and abandon the area entirely, sometimes returning only after many weeks. So could an orca have taken Nova? On paper, size isn't the problem. Adult male orcas can weigh several tons and could physically overpower a shark her size without much of a fight. But when the team lined up the orca theory against their actual data, it fell apart on every single point. First, temperature. Orcas are warm-blooded mammals with a core body temperature typically in the high 90s to around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If Nova's tag had ended up in an orca's stomach, the recorded temperature should have been hotter than what they saw, not sitting in the high 70s. That reading is simply too cool to match a marine mammal's internal environment. Second, method. Orcas don't swallow sharks whole, tag and all. They extract a specific organ and discard the rest. The data here shows something staying inside a digestive system for over a week, a whole prey event, not a surgical liver removal. Third, physiology. Orcas are air breathers. They need to resurface regularly, no matter how deep they can dive. A multi-day stay in the dark, at extreme depth, simply doesn't fit an animal that has to breathe air every few minutes. Fourth, and maybe most telling, the aftermath. When orcas move into an area, local great whites clear out, fast, and for a long time. Researchers checked the behavior of other tagged and sighted sharks in Nova's home range after her disappearance. Nothing changed, no mass exodus, no landscape of fear. Life on the shelf continued exactly as before, like nothing unusual had happened at all. That last point especially bothered the team. This didn't look like a new, terrifying predator moving in. It looked like something that already belonged there. Orcas were crossed off the list. Suspect 2. Giant and colossal squid. With orcas ruled out, attention turned to the canyon itself. Deep shelf-edge canyons like this one are famous habitat for some of the ocean's most elusive giants, including giant squid and the even larger, even less understood colossal squid. And it's easy to see why this theory is tempting. Picture it, a squid the length of a school bus, eyes the size of dinner plates, tentacles lined with hooked, rotating suckers rising out of the black to seize an unsuspecting shark and drag it into the abyss. These animals are known to be aggressive predators, capable of tangling with something as large as a sperm whale. A shark wouldn't seem out of reach for them at all. This theory would even explain some of the data beautifully. It would explain the deep, sudden plunge. That's exactly the depth these squid are known to live at. It would explain the total disappearance, since almost nothing is ever recovered from an encounter that deep. But once again, temperature kills the theory outright. Squid are cold-blooded invertebrates. Their internal temperature is essentially identical to the surrounding water. They have no biological mechanism to generate or retain extra heat. If a squid had swallowed that tag, the reading should have stayed locked at the same chilly mid-40s water temperature the whole time. It should never, under any circumstance, spike 30 degrees. A giant squid simply cannot produce that kind of heat. Biologically, it's off the table. The kraken is innocent. Suspect 3, Megalodon. Which brings us to the theory the internet loved the most. Megalodon. It's easy to understand the appeal. A 60-foot prehistoric supershark, supposedly still alive somewhere in the deepest, least explored parts of the ocean, would explain everything in one dramatic stroke. It would have the size, the jaw strength, and the appetite to make an 11-foot great white look like a snack. Some corners of the internet even argued that since Megalodon was an ancestor of the great white, it might share the same regional, warm-blooded traits, conveniently explaining the temperature spike. It's a great story. It is not good science. There is no verified physical evidence, no fresh bite marks on whale carcasses, no shed teeth recovered from deep trawls, no sonar contacts, nothing, supporting the idea that Megalodon survived extinction. And a predator that size couldn't simply hide. An animal on that scale would need enormous quantities of prey to sustain itself, and it would leave an obvious repeated footprint across the ecosystem. Unexplained mass whale deaths, distinctive massive bite radii, something. The ocean is enormous, but it isn't infinite, and a 60-foot shark cannot go undetected forever. The researchers needed an explanation grounded in biology, not folklore, and that meant asking a much sharper question. What real, living, known animal has a stomach that runs nearly 30 degrees warmer than the water around it? The real answer. The answer had been sitting in plain sight the entire time. Great white sharks are not like most fish. Most fish are fully cold-blooded. Their internal temperature simply matches the surrounding water. But great whites, along with a small handful of other elite ocean predators like tuna and mako sharks, are what's called regionally endothermic. They can keep specific parts of their bodies significantly warmer than the water around them. They do this using a structure called the rete mirabile, literally wonderful net, a dense mesh of blood vessels arranged so that warm blood, leaving the muscles, runs directly alongside cold blood coming in from the gills. Heat transfers between them instead of escaping into the ocean. This lets great whites keep their eyes, brain, swimming muscles, and stomach noticeably warmer than the surrounding water, which means faster reflexes, sharper vision, and, critically, much faster digestion. And here's the key fact. A great white shark actively digesting a large meal can maintain a stomach temperature landing right around or even above the high 70s Fahrenheit, regardless of how cold the surrounding water is. That's not a coincidence, that's a match. The deep plunge fits too. After a large meal, great whites are known to descend into deep, cold water and effectively idle there for days, using the cold environment to help regulate their body temperature while their internal furnace works overtime on digestion. It's a well-documented post-feeding behavior, not evidence of a struggle or an attack. And the lack of any landscape of fear response from the local shark population suddenly makes perfect sense too. This wasn't a new predator species arriving to terrorize the area. It was already part of the local hierarchy, just a much bigger individual than anyone had accounted for. The predator wasn't a myth, it wasn't a squid, it wasn't a resurrected prehistoric monster. It was another great white shark, bigger, older, and willing to eat one of its own. Shark cannibalism, as unsettling as it sounds to us, is not remotely rare in the ocean. It starts before birth in some species. Sand tiger shark embryos, for instance, will hunt and consume their smaller siblings while still developing inside the mother, so that only the strongest is ever born. Among juveniles and adults across multiple species, larger sharks preying on smaller ones is a documented, if rarely witnessed, part of life at the top of the food chain. Great whites are no exception, and in a canyon environment packed with competition for large, calorie-dense prey, an easy 11-foot meal swimming past at the wrong depth may have simply been too efficient a target to pass up. How big was it? Which raises an obvious, uncomfortable question. How big does a great white have to be to do this to another 11-foot shark? The math isn't gentle. To take down and swallow prey that large, With no evidence in the data of a prolonged chase or struggle, just an instantaneous temperature spike, the attacker needed overwhelming size advantage. This wasn't a fight. It was an ambush and a single, decisive strike, most likely from below, using the darkness of deep water and the attacker's own dark coloring as cover. Based on the metabolic energy required to generate that heat signature and the physical demands of subduing prey that size in seconds, researchers' conservative estimate put the attacking shark at roughly 16 to 18 feet in length, already an exceptional size for a great white, comparable to some of the largest verified individuals ever recorded, like the famous shark, known as deep blue. Some experts believe that's still a conservative flaw, and that an animal capable of this kind of single-strike predation on healthy adult prey could realistically be pushing 20 feet and several thousand pounds. We tend to picture great whites the way they show up on our screens, breaching near seal colonies, patrolling the surf line, curious around cage diving boats. But data like this points to something else entirely. A class of deep-water great whites that spend most of their lives far from any coastline or camera, growing enormous on a diet that includes whales, squid, and yes, other sharks. Nova, despite being a strong, healthy predator in her own right, wasn't the apex animal in that canyon. She was still, in the end, prey. Here's a more engaging, human-friendly version in about 170 to 190 words, while keeping all the original information. Most of us spend our time worrying about the sharks we can actually see, the fins slicing through the surface or the dark shadow moving near the shoreline. But Nova's story reminds us that the ocean's true giants are usually the ones we never see at all. They live in complete darkness, nearly half a mile beneath the surface, in a world we're only beginning to explore and understand. The ocean isn't ruled by size alone. It's ruled by one simple law: anything smaller can become prey. And based on the data researchers recovered, the animal responsible for attacking Nova may still be out there today, silently patrolling the same deep-water canyon, continuing to grow far from human eyes. So now, it's your turn. Do you believe there are great white sharks measuring more than 20 feet long, still living undiscovered in deep ocean canyons around the world? Or could something even larger be hiding in those depths? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read as many as I can. And if you enjoy exploring mysteries hidden beneath the waves, hit like and subscribe, because the ocean still holds secrets that are far stranger than we ever imagined.